This is Dr. Stephen Lowe with AdamRevival. I'm here with AdamRevival co-founder Ryan Listerman and Heidi Wilt, the executive director of a anti-human trafficking organization located out of Michigan, and it is called True North to Freedom. We're going to talk to Heidi. We're going to find out about her organization. We're going to find out how we can help here at AdamRevival. We're going to find out how you can help to the listeners and watchers and see how you guys can support this effort. There is no more noble cause than what Heidi is doing with True North to Freedom. And it is very important that we spread this message far and wide. So like, share, and subscribe. The links for True North to Freedom are going to be in the description box below. So go there, go to their website, go to their social medias, and get involved the best that you can. So now that I have that out of the way, Heidi, why don't we go ahead and turn it over to you, and you can tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about True North to Freedom.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me on.
Our pleasure.
For being concerned about this issue, because too many people either don't believe it really exists or think it just exists in faraway lands. I am the executive director of True North to Freedom. I've been the director for 5 years, going on my 6th year. And we work with survivors at a center. Our eventual goal is really to have a village where we can house, we can have housing available for them. Not so much a recovery home as it would be their own apartments and tiny homes. Many of them have children, and it's very difficult to find recovery homes that will accept a survivor and her children in the recovery process. So they oftentimes have to give up their children for a year or two while they're in a recovery program. And most of them aren't willing to do that for obvious reasons. So we have a center where we meet with them. We have 3 days a week that we're open: Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. We do individual case management. We also have a community meal once a month. And we have community time once a week where they can come and do a Bible study or learn a life skills class. We have survivors sometimes teaching those classes. So we try to do as much survivor-led as they're ready and able to do that. But we're really working on resources and helping them just navigate and find their safe space to start their healing process. We also work with a Christian counselor, and we have other MOUs, which is Memorandum of Understanding, with other organizations, so we can do more wraparound care, because we are really a small organization and we're doing big things, but on very minimal budget. And so really partnering with other organizations is very important to try and get that wraparound care, because no one organization can provide all the needs that are required for the aftercare. Rescue is so important, but there's years of recovery that has to be worked on afterwards, and that's really where we step in. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of a understanding. We can get into details now if you want.
Yeah. So, wow, that's a lot, right? That's a lot, and it's. People hear, the term human trafficking, and they might think about, some dudes throwing a girl into a van. But the reality is that it's so complex, and it's so evil that this can and it will affect the victim's life for the rest of their lives. That's not to say it won't be put to good. And that's kind of where you guys are, right? Yeah. You guys are rehabilitative. You are a Christ faith-based centered organization. Correct. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So what you just said is phenomenal. You said you have a network. Mm-hmm. Right? You guys, you're a small organization, but you have a network of support. What other kind of organizations does that encompass?
So Ignicer is a local faith-based organization that does the Christian counseling for us, for our clients. And they do specific EMDR therapy. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but that's something that we can touch on another time. But it's really a totally different form of therapy where you're doing like bilateral tapping and different things as they work through the exercises, which helps the brain redevelop the pathways that have been cut off or arrested or never developed because of the trauma that they've experienced. And we're seeing huge movement in people that follow through with that therapy, more so than talk therapy. We also partner with community mental health organizations for people that don't want a faith-based therapist, or they need psychiatric aspects that so they can get prescriptions and that kind of thing. They might have to go through that avenue. Turning Point is another organization that we partner with. They do PPOs, and they can do emergent housing sometimes as needed.
Okay.
We are part of MCAT, which is Macomb County's anti-human trafficking task force, and so that involves law enforcement and a lot of different avenues of, Michigan Works. All different kinds of organizations are a part of that, so you can start to see where those pieces of the puzzle need to come into play. Someone needs a job, they need housing, they need life skills classes, they need, whatever it is. We try to work with multiple organizations to try and make sure that those needs are being met. We do work on budgets and different finance things, but then there's other more developed programs they might need to walk in or be a part of in order to become a good renter or to start saving for a vehicle, or all the different things that come into play. So we try to get ourselves connected to as many organizations as possible, so that it's what I find, I think, Steve, that's the biggest and most difficult thing is there might be help out there, but if you don't have sort of that handoff, that direct relationship where I can talk to another director, people get lost in the shuffle. They just do.
Yeah.
They don't advocate well for themselves. They're learning all those skills. And so having that personal relationship with other directors and other organizations sort of gives the in and an avenue for the survivors to have success. Because it's easy for them to give up. Somebody doesn't answer the phone and listen to them, or they can't speak clearly about what their issue is, and people give up on them. So, yeah. So that's what I mean by, that wraparound and other relationships, other organizations.
Heidi, what do you when you most these you're mostly women and children, or is it mostly women?
So
Who's
So thanks for
who are you usually working with?
Yeah, our demographic is adults. So we work with both men and women, 18 and older. When we work with children, it's really their children that come in with them, or we're looking for services for their children, but we do not per se serve children. There are organizations in Michigan that do, and that's exactly what they're slated for, and they have specific funding for that, but they also have to have specific staff. And there's a lot of legalities in that range of working with children and minors, and so we really have stuck to adults. And the one thing that people forget, because you're 18 does not mean you're an adult and you've got it all figured out. Just like kids that they're done with foster care because they're 18. Do they have all the life skills they need to move on as an adult and have success? Most of the time not. And that's really very much the same situation with the survivors we work with. Most of them, their trafficking situation started out as minors, but they're now adults, and nobody's walked them through the process of
they have no adult experience. These are age is just age. I mean,
that was going to be my next question, was about kind of their background. Like, where do you find most of them, their general background, where they came from? Like, is it from the inner cities? Is it from the countryside?
Demographically, do you mean? Right?
Yeah, and when you talk to them, like, where do you feel like most of the time these problems started to creep into their life, or where did it kind of arise from?
Good question.
Excellent question. So it always comes back to vulnerabilities. So if we're not vulnerable, if we come from a healthy home, we have two parents, all those types of things, the vulnerabilities are less. And so the opportunity to be trafficked is less. But when you come from homes where there's one parent, or there's abuse in the home, or you have negligence, whether, of any form, they become more vulnerable. And many of them have been in the foster care system. Probably about 70% of them have had foster care as part of their upbringing. at one point or another. And so that means they came from a broken situation, right? So
Wow, that's a large statistic,
it
70%.
is,
That is a large statistic.
but it's the
Um,
truth and what
and
we see. Let me
yep,
finish. I want to answer his one question about demographics of where they come from. Excellent question, because everybody assumes they're either illegals coming in here, which is happening for sure. But what we're actually seeing is people that are born and raised right here in Michigan. All different areas. It's not just Detroit. It's not just, Port Huron. It's literally Macomb County, Oakland County, Wayne County, Lapeer County, St. Clair County. I have clients from all those counties. Many of them grew up right around where they've been trafficked. And many of them have
wow.
been trafficked by family members. That's something that's really increasing. The last 10 survivors that have come to us, 8 of them have been trafficked by family members.
Whoa.
Trafficker is
Do
parent.
these women tend to uh, phrase this question? Is it something where it's like to the outsider it might seem like it's almost voluntary, like it's their choice, it's their choice. They want it, is it something that they kind of fell into a lifestyle and then it becomes part of their identity, or is it always a situation where they got kidnapped, been held against their will, and then they escape?
Thank you for asking that. So that's what Hollywood shows us. That's what we hear on the news primarily is the kidnapping scenario. Does that happen in the United States? It totally does. It absolutely does happen. But it's much less common here than it is in third world countries. Let me just be straight. Or other places where the legal system and policing isn't as, prevalent. Those opportunities are definitely more in other places. But in the United States, it's mostly relational. So, you think about a kid that comes from a difficult home and they're seeking love, right? They need someone to tell them they're beautiful. They need someone to, care about them. And so the minute somebody does, they latch on to that relationship. And oftentimes it's a recruiter or a trafficker. And they're finding their victims online. Pretty much everything is done by social media now and online connections. Gaming rooms, they get a lot of young people in the game rooms. Roblox, Discord, Minecraft are all huge avenues right now where traffickers are seeking new victims and young victims.
Hmm.
Can I? Okay, okay. So that's astounding. I think you bring, you widen the scope of understanding of that. I'd like you to hone in a little more and give us as the least vague definition of human trafficking that you can.
So
Like it. Yep. Go ahead.
human trafficking always involves force, fraud, and coercion.
Okay.
Okay. So it's a manipulative process, right? And yes, people can be manipulated by family members. They can be manipulated by their so-called boyfriend, husband, girlfriend, mother, right? Or someone that fills that role. And yes, it does, Ryan, oftentimes look to people like they're doing this voluntarily. It's why it's so. I trained the police. I trained the Macomb County sheriffs in the fall, and the police, see this every day. But they also see people that spit at them, that don't act like they want to be rescued, and so for them, it's a hard pill to swallow. Is this really trafficking, or are they choosing this lifestyle? But I always go back to what little girl or little boy have you ever met that aspires to grow up and be a prostitute or a pimp?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not doesn't happen. They are
Yeah. And
groomed.
and
It's a grooming process. It's a preparation, and they don't often self-identify when it's relational. Think about this: if you're kidnapped and you're taken and you're forced to be trafficked, right? You're going to know that hard line of when yesterday my life was one way, today it's not. But anyone that's in a relationship, whether it's a family member, whether it's boyfriend girlfriend scenario, and I always bring up this is a whole nother avenue that we haven't really thought about or talked much about. But we've got Jeffrey Epstein, we've got P. Diddy, we've got Harvey Weinstein as just some prime examples of that as a CEO trafficker. Think about it. There's promises made, You got to do this to get to this level, right? You get where I'm going with that. It's a form of trafficking. The Hollywood
You
couch is a form of trafficking, but we've sort of negated it and acted like that's just what you do when you want to climb that ladder, right? So you can see all these different scenarios that are relational. The victim does not necessarily understand that they are a victim of human trafficking. And so they don't say, rescue me, right? And much like domestic violence, even though you don't like what's happening to you, or it doesn't, feel good, or, there's a twisted thing about love. This person loves me, they take care of me, even though they're beating me and selling me and using me, right? Well, the same thing happens in domestic violence. It takes 7 to 10 times for someone to leave that situation before their brain, right, can fully realize, I need to get out of this. It's really no different with the types of trauma that happen with human trafficking. Does that answer your question? I hope. I don't know.
It does.
Absolutely.
It does. I think it's very important that we define what human trafficking is, because people hear that term and they think I think a lot of people maybe watching this video have seen The Sound of Freedom, and they have a general understanding, but it's much more vague and broad than forcefully taking
Yep.
someone and selling them for money, right? It is coercion. It is fraud. It is manipulation. It is mental abuse. It is mental constraint. And knowing that, um, it's so much easier to understand that this happens within the family a lot,
Yes.
right? Because of that authority figure,
Mm-hmm.
and the trust factor of a loved one. It's so sad. It's so sad. Let me ask you, give us and I know there's no typicals here in your line of work, and there's no templates as far as standard goes when you're dealing with individuals and individual cases. But what does it look like when someone comes to you, beginning to end? And I guess at what point do you end or consider something complete? Um, or even do you, I guess, ever?
That's a great question. So we have a multitude of ages of survivors, and years that they've worked with us. I have one survivor that has worked. Before we were True North of Freedom, we were the Alabaster Gift, and I was a volunteer at that point. And this person started when I was, a volunteer with that, when it was named that. So we've been working with her almost 9 years. And
Wow.
yeah, but a lot of the issues that come into play are they're not ready to set up the boundaries, or the people that are supposed to be their community and their support are actual family members within what we just talked about. And it's very hard for them to cut off a parent, right? They still want the love of that parent. And sometimes those not being able to set those boundaries will keep setting them back. So there's a lot of recidivism. There's a lot of outside influence with people that aren't really their friends, but they think they're their friends. And so we're
Sure.
sort of in a battle, trying to be the constant and being their community that's healthy, that, this oftentimes it's because of, coming to the center and we pray with them and all that, they do come to know Jesus. And to me, that's the most important thing we do out of anything that is offered. If they can come to know Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior, no matter where they go, no matter what happens, they have a relationship with Him now, and God will put the people in their path, is how I view it.
Yep.
And it will forever change their life. But that doesn't mean all the trauma goes away once
Sure.
they accept Christ. So there's still a process to work through. But, then there's others where we see them for such a short time, maybe a few months to a year, and, they seem to be making huge strides depending on their ability to maybe break some of those chains and those generational curses, get deliverance, move forward in a direction that maybe they move to another state, or they move to another situation, or they move to a recovery home in another place away from where they've been trafficked, which is really The idea is to not stay where all the memories are and where all the friend groups were and the family members that were part of it. Because the more it's like anything, an alcoholic that hangs out at a bar who's trying not to be an alcoholic is going to have a lot more trouble than if they hang out, with their church group. You get what I'm saying? So it's the same kind of thing. It's breaking some of those bonds in order for them to move forward. So it really depends on individual cases. And the other factor that comes into play is, are they ready to do the work?
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
only do for someone what they're willing to do for themselves. I'm not a savior. Our organization can't save them. The only one that can save them is Jesus. And you and I both know if there's things we got to work on, no one else can do it for me. Right? They have to be willing to do the work. And it's hard work. It is hard work to overcome these things. So there's always that in place as well. But then there's others that, really do want to do the work, and I see the strides. But I will tell you, the goal that we always say to them is, we're still going to be here. No matter what, you can reach out. No matter what, you can communicate. If you are questioning, whether you're making a good decision, call us. We have a survivor line that they can call. They can text. We can be a support to them, no matter whether they're still in our program or not. So I look at it as the way Jesus looks at us. He allows us to make our choices, have our free will, and yet he's always there when we're ready to come back.